Number 1. Stony Hollow Road. Stony Hollow Road bends north of Burlington through steep limestone bluffs carved by the Mississippi River Valley. In the 1800s, wagons fought deep mud here, especially after heavy rain. That rough landscape became the setting for Iowa's best-known roadside ghost, a young woman remembered in local stories as Lucinda, still waiting above the old route. According to the legend, Lucinda climbed the bluff to wait for the man she would marry. His wagon was delayed on the muddy road, but she believed he had abandoned her. Before help came, she stepped from the cliff. The tale spread from family to family until the lonely hollow seemed tied forever to her mistake and the promise she thought had been broken. Travelers later claimed they saw a slim figure near the rock wall, sometimes carrying a red rose. She rarely acts threatening. Instead, witnesses describe her as quiet and welcoming, appearing for a moment in headlights before fading against the pale stone. Wind and shadow can explain much, yet the same details return on damp nights when mist settles low. That is why Stony Hollow Road still feels like more than a scenic drive. Its curves, bluffs, and old wagon history give the legend a real place to live. Lucinda may belong to folklore, but her story has lasted because it turns one late arrival into a warning about grief, patience, and a road that never forgot. Even daylight cannot fully soften that end. Number 2. Banwell Bridge. West of Fort Dodge, the 220th Street overpass crosses active Union Pacific tracks near the old settlement of Tara. In the late 1800s, coal mines and rail traffic once filled this area with engines, workers, and smoke. Today, much of Tara is quiet, which makes Banwell Bridge feel like a doorway left open to Iowa's railroad age and its vanished work camps. Local drivers call it Terror Bridge, though the structure itself is a historic pony truss crossing rather than a ruin. The legend begins after dark, when parked visitors say they hear the far-off chuff of a steam locomotive. The sound seems to rise from the tracks below, even when no freight train is approaching and no headlamp appears around the bend. Others report pale lights moving through the nearby forest or engine trouble while crossing. Those stories are hard to prove, and the railroad can create echoes that travel strangely across open land. Still, the old town's history gives every metallic groan and distant horn a deeper weight after midnight, when the fields offer nowhere for sound to hide. Banwell Bridge remains unsettling because the past is never completely silent there. Coal camps vanished, steam engines disappeared, and Tara faded from the map, but the tracks kept working. On a still night, an echo can make a traveler wonder whether a train belongs to Union Pacific or to the town that waited beside it, lamps glowing beside the tracks. Number 3. Brown Street. Brown Street in Iowa City was laid out as a graceful residential avenue and became a premier brick avenue in 1907. Great oaks soon arched above homes built for judges, professors, and business leaders. Yet its quiet beauty carried an older purpose, because funeral processions once followed this route toward Oakland Cemetery, at the street's northern end. Before automobiles became common, horse-drawn hearses moved slowly over the street's hard surface. Hooves struck the bricks in a steady rhythm, while families walked or rode behind. By the time Brown Street became one of the city's finest neighborhoods, generations had already watched those lines pass beneath the trees, curtains drawn and voices lowered. Residents later began telling of carriage sounds on autumn evenings. They described clacks behind them, then silence when they turned. No wagon appeared, and no horse crossed the lamplight. The brick pavement, falling acorns and branches can create convincing noises, but funeral history makes each sound feel personal, as though the root remembers its duty. Brown Street does not need a dramatic ghost to remain haunting. Its legend lives in repetition. Wheels once crossed these bricks again and again, carrying Iowa City's early settlers to their final stop. When the street grows empty and the oak leaves scrape along the curb, the old procession seems only one block behind, moving at the same slow pace. Number 4. Marsh Rainbow Arch Bridge. South of Lake City stands a concrete bridge built in the Marsh Rainbow Arch style, a design once promoted for durable automobile roads. It also sits along the Lincoln Highway Heritage Byway, linking it to America's first coast-to-coast highway. Yet Iowa folklore gave this engineering landmark a much sweeter reputation than most haunted crossings receive. The story says a spirit on the bridge adores chocolate. Visitors are told to leave a sealed bar on the span at midnight and return after sunrise. By morning, the wrapper may still look unopened, but the chocolate inside will be missing. No death is needed in this tale. Mystery arrives, craving sweets instead, with no clue about who took the first bite. Teenagers have repeated the challenge for years, checking wrappers for tears or loose folds. Animals, heat, and clever friends offer easy explanations, but the game depends on not watching too closely. The bridge turns a candy bar into evidence, and every missing piece gives the legend another life, passed along during drives on the old Lincoln Highway. The Marsh Rainbow Arch Bridge is memorable because its ghost story matches the joy of the open road. It joins concrete, highway history, and a harmless midnight dare in one place. Travelers may come for the arch or the Lincoln Highway, but many leave wondering how a spirit could steal the chocolate and spare the wrapper, neat as though nothing happened. Number 5. Roseman Covered Bridge.
Lift it higher now. Watch the left side.
Roseman Covered Bridge was built southwest of Winterset in 1883 by Harvey P. Jones and George K. Foster for $2,930. Its red sides shelter a town lattice truss, and its unusual flat roof became a signature of Jones's work. The bridge carried local traffic for nearly a century before being bypassed in 1981 and later restored as a Madison County landmark. Its strangest story dates to 1892, when a sheriff's posse reportedly cornered an escaped prisoner inside the old span. Men entered from each end. Then came gunfire, a cry, and sudden silence. When the officers met in the middle, the fugitive had vanished, though there was no clear path down to the river and no trail leading into the surrounding fields. Later, visitors told of footsteps crossing the planks when the bridge was empty. Others felt cold patches in the center or heard laughter under the roof. Wind can slip through old boards, and timber expands and settles with temperature. But the escape story gives every creak the shape of someone moving just out of sight, one pace ahead of whoever listens. Roseman became internationally famous through the bridges of Madison County, yet its mystery still clings to the rafters. It is both a preserved piece of 19th century engineering and the scene of an unfinished chase. Number 6. Matzel Bridge. Northeast of Springville, Matzel Bridge carries a narrow road 303 feet across the Wapsipinicon River. The present steel plate girder span was built in 1938 and 1939, replacing a mixed collection of older trusses raised between 1870 and 1906. Works Progress Administration labor helped complete the crossing during the final years of the Great Depression. The bridge later became the center of a favorite Lynn County test. The story says a driver who stops at midnight, switches off the engine, and leaves the car in neutral will feel a quiet, unseen force begin to push. Slowly, the vehicle rolls toward the opposite bank, as though invisible hands are guiding it away from the dark water beneath the deck. Gravity and a slight change in grade offer the safest explanation, and the trick has been repeated at similar mystery hills across America. Even so, Matzel Bridge gained enough fame to draw investigators and radio crews. Some visitors added tales of handprints on dusty cars, although no verified tragedy explains who those helpful hands should belong to. The bridge entered the National Register of Historic Places in 1998, while the land around it grew into Lynn County's largest natural area. That real history gives the legend a stronger setting: old steel, the slow river, and nearly 2,000 acres of woods. When tires begin turning without an engine, reason feels farther away than the opposite shore. Number 7. Crybaby Bridge. Southeast of Ottumwa, a rural bridge lies near Mars Hill Church, one of Iowa's oldest log churches still in use. Baptists built the hewn log structure between 1850 and 1857, and its cemetery holds generations of local families. The church entered the National Register of Historic Places in 1974, long before ghost hunters made the nearby crossing famous. The road became known as Crybaby Bridge, through a sorrowful piece of local folklore. In the most repeated version, a mother left Mars Hill after her child's baptism and lost the baby near the bridge. Other tellings change what happened, which is common with legends passed aloud. All of them end with the same sound: a child crying after midnight. Visitors describe a weak wail drifting over the creek, sometimes so soft that it could be an owl, a fox, or wind moving through the trees. Some stories add tiny handprints on parked cars, yet no historical record confirms the tragedy behind the tale. The uncertain details have not weakened it. They have allowed each generation to retell it in its own way. Mars Hill itself survived a serious arson fire in 2006 and was restored before its rededication in 2008. That documented rescue belongs to history, while the crying belongs to folklore. Still, on a quiet back road beside a log church and cemetery, the two seem close together. The bridge keeps no records, only a small sound that never grows near enough to find. Number 8. Interstate 80, Mitchellville Stretch. Interstate 80 between Mitchellville and Des Moines carries streams of cars across land, traveled long before pavement. Iowa's first interstate section opened near Des Moines in 1958, but the region's recorded story reaches back to 1673, when Louis Joliet and Jacques Marquette explored the Mississippi. French traders later followed Iowa's river valleys west. Against that old background came the legend of the I-80 highwayman. Drivers say a glowing man appears on the shoulder dressed in a long coat and clothing that resembles the colonial era. He walks toward Des Moines without looking at traffic. When headlights reach him, his outline brightens, then disappears between cars before anyone can stop or look back. Folklore calls him a lost French fur trapper, though no document identifies a missing man at that location. Reflections, fatigue, fog, and roadside signs can turn into human shapes during a late drive. Yet reports have continued for decades, always placing an old traveler beside one of Iowa's busiest roads, moving at the pace of another century. That contrast keeps the story alive. The interstate was created for speed, but its ghost never hurries. Trucks thunder past, exits flash by, and the glowing walker continues along the shoulder as if Des Moines were still a distant trading post. For 1 second, the newest road in the landscape seems to cross the oldest path, and neither traveler gives way. Number 9. Highway 34 westbound. West of Burlington, U.S., Highway 34 follows a route with more than a century of travel and commerce behind it. The corridor began as the Bluegrass Road in 1910, became part of the numbered U.S. highway system in 1926, and was fully paved across Iowa by 1930. Near the Mississippi River, however, one traveler is said to belong to a much earlier road. Between 1 and 2 in the morning, drivers report a man walking west alone on the north shoulder. His clothing resembles the 1800s, and a worn leather satchel hangs at his side. He does not wave for help or turn toward approaching cars. Instead, headlights catch him for a few seconds before his figure thins into fog and leaves an empty strip of gravel. No known record connects the walker to a named accident, stage route, or local death. That makes the Highway 34 ghost less a solved history than an eternal traveler tale. Mist from the river, tired eyes, and reflections can easily build a person from shadows, but witnesses continue to repeat the same direction, the same hour, and the same leather bag. Highway 34 has carried wagons, early motorists, soldiers, families, and freight toward the west for miles. The lonely man seems to carry that whole history in one small satchel. He never reaches Burlington behind him or the next town ahead. He simply walks where generations have traveled, fading whenever the modern road comes close enough to reveal his face. Number 10. Birthday Bridge. Near Kentucky Avenue and US 218 in Floyd County, an older rural crossing became known as Birthday Bridge, or Giblin Bridge. The aged wooden span no longer stands as early storytellers remembered it, but its name entered Iowa paranormal history in 1972. That year, author Brad Steiger published a book describing psychic Irene Hughes and the site. The legend centers on a young woman whose life supposedly ended at the bridge on her birthday. Some versions say she had been involved with a married doctor. Others remove that detail and speak only of heartbreak. Local tellings claim that once each year, her pale shape returns to the crossing, turning an ordinary date into the hour the road remembers. No surviving public record proves the woman's identity or confirms the death as the story describes it. Steiger's book, Irene Hughes, on Psychic Safari, did something records could not. It carried the Floyd County legend beyond nearby farms. Strange lights, a distant figure, and uneasy feelings were repeated until Birthday Bridge became a statewide campfire name. Roads change, bridges are replaced, and landmarks can vanish without ending the stories attached to them. Travelers still search near US 218 for a place that now lives partly in memory and partly in print. Number 11. Kate Shelley High Bridge Road. West of Boone, two immense railroad viaducts rise above the Des Moines River Valley. The older Boone Viaduct was completed in 1901, while Union Pacific opened the neighboring Kate Shelley Bridge in 2009. Both honor a young Iowa woman whose famous journey happened 20 years before the first high bridge was built. Its steel rises 185 feet above the river. On the stormy night of July 6, 1881, a railroad engine plunged through the washed-out Honey Creek Bridge near Moingona. Kate Shelley, then a teenager, knew another train was due. Carrying a lantern, she crawled across a different wooden bridge over the flooded Des Moines River and reached the station in time to give warning. Floodwater roared below her. Kate also guided rescuers back toward the wreck, and newspapers across the country celebrated her courage. The nearby high bridge later took her name, though it was not the bridge she crossed. Local folklore added a ghostly detail. During hard summer storms, drivers on the viewing roads sometimes see a lantern swaying above the tracks. Her legend grew. A distant signal, lightning or rain on a window, may explain the glow. Still, the image fits the true story so well that it has endured. Number 12. Lover's Leap Swinging Bridge. At Columbus Junction, a narrow footbridge stretches 262 feet across an 80-foot wooded ravine. The first crossing was built in the 1880s, so residents could walk directly between parts of town instead of circling the deep cut. Several early versions failed or were removed, and the present cable and plank bridge was completed in 1922. It served locals. The bridge gained the name Lover's Leap from a local tale about a young Native American woman waiting for a man who never returned. In the story, grief led her to leap into the ravine. No historical record identifies the woman, her nation, or the event, so the account belongs to later community folklore rather than documented indigenous history. The tale lives. After sunset, walkers say the bridge sways even when their steps have stopped. Wind moves through the trees below and whistles along the cables, sometimes forming a long, rising note. To nervous visitors, it sounds less like air passing through a valley and more like a woman singing from somewhere beyond the reach of the lanterns. It seems to follow. The motion has a simple cause. A suspension footbridge is meant to move, yet knowing that does not make the crossing feel still. Each plank answers your weight. The ravine opens beneath your feet, and the far end seems to drift away. By the middle, history and legend sway together, held by cables above a story with no named witness. It sways underfoot. Number 13, Central Avenue. Central Avenue lies in Bettendorf, a Mississippi River city once known first as Lilienthal and later as Gilbert. In 1903, the town adopted the Bettendorf name after William and Joseph. Bettendorf moved their iron wagon business to the riverfront. Industry, rail lines, and workers soon reshaped the small settlement into a busy factory community over time. The avenue's ghost story changes depending on who tells it. One local version describes a polite man in early 20th century clothes taking an evening walk before vanishing near the river. Other folklore guides replace him with a middle-aged washerwoman carrying a wooden tub, a figure said to have appeared in the area since the late 1800s. They coexist. Those clashing descriptions make the legend unusual. At dusk, the witness may see a dark coat, an apron, or only a person-shaped shadow beneath a street lamp. River mist, passing cars, and old trees can alter a familiar outline in seconds. With no named death or verified event attached to the apparition, the story remains an unsettled piece of local lore. Perhaps Central Avenue does not have one ghost at all, but a memory shaped by generations of workers who walked toward factories, homes, and the Mississippi. The figure always seems calm at dusk and never stays long. It takes a few measured steps, reaches the dim edge of the block, and disappears as though the older town has called another resident home. Number 14, Centerville Railroad Tracks Crossing. Centerville grew from a settlement founded in 1846 into one of southern Iowa's important coal towns. Its first mine opened in 1868 near the railroad depot, and later companies sent Appanoose County coal across the region. Tracks, sidings, and gravel crossings became part of daily life as whistles marked work shifts and long freight trains moved through town. At an abandoned crossing, local teenagers tell of green lights flickering beside the tree line at dusk. The folklore says they belong to a native leader who watches the old route and guides lost drivers back toward the highway. No reliable record names this person or links the lights to an indigenous account, so that part should be heard as modern legend. At night, even without a ghost, railroad ground can create strange sights. Old signal glass, insects, distant headlights, and moisture in the air may flash green through branches. A road that ends near unused tracks also feels cut off from the present. When the rails disappear into weeds, Every moving light seems to know a path the driver cannot see. Centerville's real rail and mining history gives the tale its weight. People relied on these lines, but many tracks grew quiet as the coal era faded. The green glow in the story does not chase anyone. It leads them away. Then it blinks out behind the trees, leaving only gravel, rusted rails, and the sense that someone watched until the road was safe. Number 15. The Five-Way Gravel Intersection. Outside Oskaloosa, Mahaska County's gravel roads spread across farmland in long, practical lines. The county was organized in 1844, and its road network later grew to connect farms, mines, schools, and market towns. Today, more than 800 of its nearly 1,000 miles of county road remain gravel, making an odd five-way junction believable. Folklore says the intersection changes after midnight. A vintage hearse appears on one branch, its lamps shaking over the loose stone. A shadowy chauffeur drives straight toward any car waiting at the center. Instead of striking it, the hearse passes through the vehicle without a sound, then races away down another road and vanishes beyond the fields. No archived crash or funeral explains the tale, and versions disagree about the driver, the passengers, and the exact road. That uncertainty is part of its campfire life. Five directions make it very easy to lose track of distant headlights, while dust can hide a car and reveal it again. For a frightened driver, an ordinary turn can look impossible. The intersection's power comes from choice. A crossroads offers two directions, but five feels like a puzzle built into the land. At midnight, every branch seems equally empty until one carries a pair of lights. The hearse never leaves proof, only a cloud of gravel dust, and a driver wondering which road it entered and why none of the five roads carried it away. Number 16. Pleasant Ridge Cemetery Road. Near Palo, Pleasant Ridge Cemetery Road climbs through quiet Lynn County woods toward a burial ground that dates to the pioneer era. One marked grave belongs to Thankful Blackburn, who died in 1862. The route is better known as 13 Steps Road, named for the concrete stairway rising from the roadside into the cemetery. The hill feels older than the road. Local tradition says the steps refuse to stay counted. A visitor may climb 13 on the way up, then find 12 or 14 when returning. Some versions claim the stairway seems to vanish when viewed from below. The tale has no proven events behind it, yet the odd number and isolated setting have kept the challenge alive for generations after dark. A second story gives the road a guardian rather than a threat. Drivers and walkers describe a large dog moving between the trees with eyes that catch the light. It does not chase or growl. Instead, the animal appears when someone is uncertain, follows at a distance, and disappears once the visitor has found the road back toward Palo without leaving tracks. Concrete steps can look different in darkness, and wild animals often pass through rural cemeteries. Still, Pleasant Ridge joins both details into one lasting legend: a stairway that will not hold its number, and a silent dog that will not let travelers become lost. Beyond the 13th step, The woods seemed to be counting too. Number 17, Greenwood Cemetery Road and Lucas Street. Lucas Street leads into Greenwood Cemetery in Muscatine, where one monument stands apart from the older stones. Known as the Blue Angel, the bronze figure was placed there in the 1950s. Years of rain, air, and changing seasons slowly covered the metal with a blue-green patina, giving the statue the color that created its famous name. It stands there still. Science explains the change. Bronze contains copper, and copper reacts with the environment over time. Local imagination supplied a different answer. Stories began claiming the angel altered its color because it guarded the cemetery, absorbing sorrow from the graves around it until its surface no longer looked like ordinary metal. The old story endured. Night visitors added that the statue's eyes sometimes glow or seem to follow cars traveling along Lucas Street. Reflections from headlights can slide across polished areas of bronze, while shadows from trees change the expression of the angel. Yet from the roadway, the tall blue-green figure can appear awake long after the cemetery has gone still at sunset. The Blue Angel is not frightening in most versions of the legend. It watches rather than wanders, standing through winter snow and summer storms as a protector of Greenwood's dead. A natural chemical process gave the monument its color, but folklore gave that color a purpose, and the angel has guarded the road ever since. The cemetery keeps quiet. Number 18, Oakland Cemetery Road and Reno Street. Reno Street leads toward Oakland Cemetery in Iowa City, where an 8-foot bronze monument has become one of the state's best-known graveyard legends. The Black Angel was erected in 1912 by a grieving widow as a memorial to her family. Its raised wings and dark face soon made it unlike any other figure among the surrounding stones. It remains in place. The statue was not originally black. Exposure to weather slowly darkened the bronze through oxidation, a natural process that also changes old roofs and outdoor monuments. Local students from the nearby University of Iowa preferred a stranger explanation, claiming the metal changed overnight because the angel carried a curse or marked hidden wrongdoing. Midnight dares followed. One story claimed that touching the monument would bring bad luck. Another said a kiss beneath its wings could prove whether a person was truthful. Later versions softened the danger and turned the touch into a promise of luck on examinations. The rules changed, but the angel remained at the center of every challenge at midnight. Oakland Cemetery closes each night, and respectful visitors keep to its paths, yet the legend travels far beyond the gates. Headlights on Reno Street can briefly outline the wings before darkness covers them again. The monument's color has a scientific cause, but after more than a century, the Black Angel still seems to be keeping its own quiet answer. Number 19, Oakdale Cemetery Road. Today, Eastern Avenue reaches Oakdale Cemetery in Davenport, a landscaped burial ground established in 1856 as the city expanded along the Mississippi River. Curving roads pass monuments from the Civil War era and memorials connected to children from the Iowa Soldiers' Orphans Home, founded during the war to care for young people left without support. Among Oakdale's unusual markers is one bearing the words, "Limb of unknown child." The very brief inscription offers no complete name or life story, and that absence has helped create a gentle legend. Visitors say children's laughter sometimes carries across the cemetery roads after closing, even when no family or school group remains inside the grounds. Birds, distant playgrounds, and voices softly traveling through open air can sound surprisingly close. Oakdale's trees and rolling ground also bend echoes, making it difficult to judge where a sound began. Still, the laughter is often reported near the older section, where small stones remind visitors how many young lives were shaped by war. The tale is sad, but it is rarely told as threatening. The unseen children seem to be playing, not asking anyone to follow. A driver hears one bright burst beyond the headstones, slows, and listens until the road becomes silent again. Then Oakdale returns to stillness, holding names, memories, and one unknown child beneath the trees. It remains peaceful. Number 20, Tara Trestle Bridge. Outside Tara, a rail town that has nearly disappeared, a massive timber and steel trestle crosses the Webster County landscape. During the late 1800s, coal mines and rail traffic brought workers, freight, and steam engines through this part of Iowa. As mines closed and buildings disappeared, the railway remained above a valley that had grown quiet again. Local historians and photographers visit the trestle for its scale, but summer evenings gave it another reputation. People below the bridge report hearing the hard clatter of a locomotive moving across the timbers. The sound grows louder as though an engine is approaching, yet no headlamp appears and no train passes over the span. The echo comes back. Railroad noise can travel for miles over open country, and metal expands as temperatures fall after sunset. Wind also strikes the structure and sends vibrations through the valley. Those explanations fit many nights, but witnesses say the phantom train has the rhythm of wheels, rods, and steam machinery from an age no longer working on the line at dusk. Tara once depended on trains, so its legend brings them back in sound rather than sight. The invisible engine crosses above abandoned ground, completes a journey no timetable records, and fades beyond the trestle. When the last echo leaves the valley, the old town seems present for one moment, and then disappears for a second time. The valley stays empty. Number 21, Cameron School Road. West of Ames, Cameron School Road carries the name of a real pioneer school. Henry and Amanda Cameron settled in Story County in 1852, and a brick one-room school rose on their land in 1872, replacing an earlier log building. It taught local children until about 1950, burned in 1956, and gave the road its official name in 1989. The brick walls are gone. Farther along the gravel stands the strange landmark residence called the Shrine. Local descriptions remember a tall wooden tower, gates, platforms, and bright words painted across the boards. The usual story says a man built it during the mid-1900s after losing members of his family. turning an open patch beside his home into a private, solemn memorial. The tragedy behind that account has never been firmly documented, and nearly every retelling changes the details. Some called the place Flower Park. Others said it was a playground or a monument. Teenagers drove past at dusk, expecting the ghost, then became more unsettled by the silent old structure rising above fields where nothing else stood so high. Time and weather damaged much of the wooden work, but its image stayed in Ames folklore. The lone road already remembered a school that disappeared in fire. The shrine added another place that seemed caught between memory and ruin. When its dark frame appeared beyond the corn, drivers often slowed, wondering whose names its builder had refused to forget. Number 22, Hickory Grove Cemetery Road. Near Avery, a gravel road approaches Hickory Grove Cemetery through quiet Monroe County farmland. Avery itself began beside the railroad in 1868, but the cemetery's strangest landmark came much later. In 1939, Axel Peterson built 3 small Egyptian-style pyramids near the back of the grounds, far from the deserts that inspired them. It remains remote. Peterson studied Egyptian history and shaped the tombs as careful models of the pyramids at Giza. The tallest reaches about 14 feet. He planned for himself and a friend to rest inside, but that wish was never completed. Peterson was buried in another cemetery, leaving the stone chambers empty and their sealed shapes without occupants. In the dusk, roadside lore says the old wooden crossing near Hickory Grove feels like a doorway into another year. Tires thump over the planks, farm sounds fade, and the pyramids appear where ordinary headstones should be. Visitors describe a heavy silence, though timber, hills, and thick autumn leaves can easily swallow the noise from the nearest road. At twilight, nothing supernatural is needed to make the final view strange. 3 accurate copies of ancient royal tombs stand in an Iowa burial ground, built by one man and never used as he intended. At dusk, their sharp edges darken against the trees, and the empty pyramids seem less like monuments than rooms still waiting for the people promised to them. Number 23, Mills Civic Parkway and 88th Street Roundabout. At Mills Civic Parkway and 88th Street, modern traffic circles a patch of pioneer ground. Houston Cemetery sits within the roadway in West Des Moines, protected like a small island between moving cars. The Houston family arrived in Iowa in 1849 and operated a farm, tavern, and post office along a busy stagecoach route. The city eventually grew around it. James Houston became a landowner and community leader and was buried there in 1889. The plot also holds his wife, Nancy, and several of their children. Current records note 19 headstone fragments, although early accounts suggest about a dozen graves. Local history also links the nearby Houston home to aid for freedom seekers. Their story stays here. As West Des Moines expanded, the countryside became neighborhoods and broad streets. But the burial plot could not simply be erased. Roads once passed dangerously close to those stones. They were later arranged to encircle the cemetery, creating the unusual roundabout that surprises drivers who expect landscaping and instead see weathered family markers. There is no threatening ghost in this story. The haunting comes from contrast. Cars glide through a 21st century intersection, while graves from the 1800s remain at its center. Number 24, Skull Hollow Road. Near McGregor, roads twist through the steep bluffs of Iowa's driftless area, a landscape the last glaciers did not flatten. Alexander McGregor opened a Mississippi River ferry in 1837, laid out his settlement in 1847, and watched it become an incorporated town in 1857. Trade, railroads, and frontier traffic soon filled the narrow valley. It grew fast. One back road is remembered in driving lore as Skull Hollow Road. Stories connect its grim name to old frontier fighting, but no clear local record proves a single real battle or explains whose remains gave the hollow its title. That missing history lets the name do most of the work, turning every bend between rock walls into the edge of an untold event. The bluffs contain sandstone openings, ravines, and hidden channels where moving air can produce low whistles. On windy autumn nights, drivers say those sounds resemble whispers traveling beside the car. Loose stone clicks down slopes, leaves scrape the road, and headlights catch pale rock for an instant before the next curve takes it away. At twilight. Skull Hollow is most effective when it refuses to explain itself. McGregor's real past is rich with ferries, traders, rail cars, and settlers, yet the road's darker origin remains uncertain. The wind keeps passing through the stone as it did before the town existed, carrying a quiet voice with no words and a name that makes every traveler listen harder. Number 25, Iron Hill Roads and White Farm Tracks. Near Charles City, the quiet tracks around Iron Hill and the former White Farm carry one of Iowa's most emotional railroad tales. The legend describes a fiery wreck in the 1920s with a wooden passenger car filled with orphan children. Smoke covered the rails. The doors would not open, and their cries were said to linger after the fire through the dark. Later, visitors reported the scent of wood smoke on cold evenings, a little girl in a white dress, and even a burned toy doll near the track. Yet searches of newspapers, railroad reports, and local archives found no passenger fire matching the story. Freight accidents occurred elsewhere, but not at the place and time named by the legend. The story spread. One true event may have helped the tale grow. An orphan train safely stopped in Charles City in 1917. Such trains carried homeless or abandoned children from eastern cities to new homes across the country, and thousands came to Iowa. Over time, that real arrival may have been mixed with another crash story until rescue became tragedy. Number 26, Porterhouse Drive. In Decorah's Broadway Historic District, a red brick Italianate house rises above gardens and an unusual stone wall. Merchant Dighton B. Ellsworth built it in 1867 after the Civil War, not 1875 as some retellings claim. The Young family bought it in 1898, and after Grace Young married Adelbert Burt Porter in 1904, the building became the Porter House. Burt and Grace filled the rooms with art, music, travel souvenirs, butterflies, fossils, and natural history specimens. They had no children, which makes the local tale of a little boy locked in the tower difficult to connect with the known Porter family. Even so, visitors sometimes repeat the story when the upper windows darken after closing on quiet evenings. According to the lighter legend, a child once hid in the tower during a freezing night and passed the hours with a toy train. Drivers near the house later claimed they heard tiny wheels circling above them, followed by a whistle too soft for a real locomotive. The museum's records do not confirm the event, so the boy belongs to folklore, not history. The house became a museum in 1969, preserving the Porters' collections and the world they built indoors. At dusk, the tower stands over the driveway, while leaves move along the stone wall. Number 27, Urbandale Wooded Lanes. Urbandale began as a streetcar suburb northwest of Des Moines. A rail line reached the area in 1905. The Urbandale Plat was recorded in 1907, and the city incorporated on April 16, 1917. Coal mines also employed early residents, but most closed during the 1930s, and the final local mine ended work in 1947. The streetcars ran until June 19, 1950. As houses replaced fields, a strip of woods near Springbrook became linked to a figure called Uncle Charlie. Folklore does not supply a proven surname, grave, or pioneer record. Some storytellers describe him as a friendly guardian watching over families. Others remember a pale runner who appears only after someone points a camera into the trees after sunset. The best-known challenge asks visitors to walk the wooded lane at night and take a flash photograph. The path may look empty when the shutter clicks, yet the developed picture, or phone screen in newer versions, supposedly shows a man running behind them. Branches, mist, and reflected light can easily build a face, but the dare continues on damp evenings. Urbandale has grown from 298 residents in 1920 into a large modern suburb, while the old streetcar and mine landscape has almost vanished. Uncle Charlie survives because he belongs to the remaining darkness between neighborhoods. Number 28, Black Hawk Bridge Road and Highway 9. For nearly a century, Highway 9 reached the Mississippi River at Lansing through the Black Hawk Bridge. The narrow cantilever crossing opened on June 17, 1931, joining Iowa with Wisconsin across 1,653 feet of steel above the main channel. Its high trusses and metal deck made every meeting with a large truck feel close, while the river moved far below. Night drivers added a gentler mystery to that tense crossing. They spoke of green lights drifting across the water beneath the bridge, sometimes keeping pace with a car. In local lore, the glow guided travelers safely toward the opposite bank. River buoys, boats, reflections, and mist could explain much, but the lights seemed to move with purpose after sunset. The old bridge is no longer there. It closed permanently on October 20th, 2025, and its central spans were brought down by implosion on December 19th. A ferry now carries vehicles, while a replacement bridge is built, with opening planned for 2027. That change turns the legend into the memory of a road crossing that has physically disappeared. People in Lansing watch the skyline lose a shape that had framed the river since the Great Depression. Perhaps the green lights were ordinary signals, but they now shine in stories beneath empty air. Until the new span opens, a night traveler can reach the bank, look across the dark Mississippi, and imagine the vanished bridge still leading the way through fog. Number 29. Woodland Cemetery Roads. Woodland Cemetery began in 1848, before Des Moines became Iowa's capital and before the city was formally incorporated. 5 farmers donated the first 5.5 acres, then called Fort Des Moines Cemetery. Its earliest recorded burial came in 1850, and the city took control in 1857 as the young settlement expanded west of the river. It began beside the frontier settlement. The winding roads now pass more than 80,000 burials. Governors, judges, business leaders, suffrage workers, Civil War soldiers, and ordinary families lie beneath trees planted across generations. Among them are Governor Samuel Merrill, General Marcellus Crocker, Hoyt Sherman, and people connected to the Underground Railroad. Old trees shade every turn. Woodland's unusual voices do not require a ghost. Small signs beside selected graves carry QR codes. A visitor points a phone at one and hears a short video explain the life behind the name. In the quiet cemetery, a face and voice suddenly return through the screen, making a stone that seemed silent moments before feel close to the present. After the recording ends, the roadway becomes still again. Leaves cross the pavement, monuments rise in rows, and downtown traffic sounds far away. Number 30. Old Highway 7. The final road on this list hides a problem deeper than fog. Dover Township is real and lies in Fayette County, Iowa, with old settlements such as Dover Mills and El Dorado nearby. Yet maps identify Iowa Highway 150 as the township's main state route. No dependable road record places an Old Highway 7 there, despite the location repeated online. The famous haunted road account actually points to Dover, Arkansas. That old Highway 7 winds through Ozark Woods, where motorists describe pale orbs dancing in mist. Iowa's own Highway 7 did exist from 1957 to 1968, but it ran between Sioux City and an area west of Lamar's, hundreds of miles from Fayette County. The names became tangled in many retellings. That does not mean Northeast Iowa lacks an eerie road. Dover Township has wooded slopes, old cemetery lanes, abandoned traces, and fog common to the driftless region. Headlights striking rain, insects, reflective signs, or moisture can form moving balls of light. But attaching those sites to Highway 7 creates a legend built on a mistaken map. Perhaps that mistake is the most fitting ending of all. Travelers search for a haunted Iowa highway that history says was never there, following copied directions into roads with different names. The mist still glows. The curves still vanish beyond the beams.
If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.
In southern Kansas in 1601, Spanish explorer Juan de Oñate led men into what is now the prairie and found something the records did not predict. The ancestors of the Wichita Nation lived in a settlement so wide the Spanish called it the Great Settlement. Thousands of grass-thatched houses stretched for miles, with fields, paths, storage pits, and a population some estimates place near 20,000. Cahokia rose across the Mississippi from modern St. Louis. Thousands of people gathered in a planned city of plazas, homes, and ceremonial spaces. Its builders had no metal tools, no wheels, no draft animals. Yet they moved earth basket by basket, shaping more than 100 mounds across the floodplain. It vanished all of a sudden. These are 30 lost cities hidden beneath America. Number 1. Ozette, Washington. On the wild coast of Washington, near Cape Alava, the Maca village of Ozette once faced the Pacific with cedar houses, whaling canoes, and smoke rising from hearths. Around 1560, a heavy wall of mud slid down from the bluff and buried part of the village in one terrible rush. People escaped what they could, but 5 longhouses vanished under wet clay. For centuries, the sea wind passed over the buried rooms without moving them. The same mud that destroyed Ozette also protected it. Air could not reach the wood, fibers, and baskets, so things that usually rot stayed almost untouched. Cedar mats, carved boxes, wooden bowls, fish hooks, and toys waited in the dark, holding the shape of daily life. In 1970, a storm exposed old wood near the shore, and the Maca tribe worked with archaeologists to save the site before waves took it away. They used gentle water sprays instead of shovels, washing the clay grain by grain. More than 50,000 objects came out of the earth, not as treasure, but as proof of families who cooked, carved, fished, and prayed there. Ozette is called the American Pompeii because disaster froze a living town in place. Yet its story is not only about loss, it is about a people whose skill and memory survived under mud for 400 years. When the tide rolls in near Cape Alava, it feels like the village is still speaking softly through cedar, rain, sand, and the cold, rainy shore. Number 2. Ferguson, South Carolina. In the early 1900s, Ferguson, South Carolina was not a ghost town. It was a busy lumber town beside the Santee River, built around the work of cutting cypress from the swamp. Families lived near paved streets, a school bell rang, and workers walked toward the mill before sunrise. For a while, the town looked modern, planned, and full of promise. But lumber towns could fade as fast as they rose. When the mill closed, jobs disappeared, families moved, and buildings that once held noise were left to the heat and vines. Then came a larger change. In the 1930s, the Santee Cooper Project built dams to control water and bring power, and the low land around Ferguson was chosen to become part of Lake Marion. By 1939, the rising water did what time had not finished. It covered streets, foundations, work yards, and the places where people once bought food or waited for mail. Ferguson was not carefully lifted and rebuilt somewhere else. It was left in place. The lake spread over it slowly, turning a former company town into a hidden map beneath brown-green water. During dry seasons, boaters sometimes look across Lake Marion and see the old brick kiln standing above the surface like a chimney from another world. It is only a piece of an industrial town, but it tells the whole story. Ferguson did not vanish in legend. It was drowned by progress, and the water still keeps its streets quiet beneath the trees. Number 3. Seattle Underground, Washington. Seattle, June 6, 1889. A glue pot in a cabinet shop helped start a fire that tore through the wooden business district. Flames jumped from building to building, eating blocks of shops, offices, and hotels. When the smoke cleared, the city had lost its old center, but leaders saw a chance to fix a daily problem: flooding. The new plan sounded strange, but it was bold. Buildings would be rebuilt in brick and stone, while the streets would be raised above the muddy original level. In some places, the new roadways stood more than a story higher than the sidewalks below. For a while, shoppers had to climb ladders between the old entrances and the streets rising around them. Business did not stop. Store owners kept selling goods from the lower floors, while workers built retaining walls and filled the streets above. Later, sidewalks were laid across the gaps like bridges. The first floors became basements. Windows turned into buried openings. Doorways that once faced daylight suddenly looked into tunnels, dust, and dim brick corridors. That is how Seattle kept a piece of its earlier city beneath the modern one. Under Pioneer Square, old storefronts still line shadowed passages where people once hurried with packages and rain-soaked coats. The underground is not a fantasy city. Number 4. Cahokia, Illinois. Across the Mississippi River from modern St. Louis, the land rises into great green mounds that once formed the heart of Cahokia. Around 1050 CE, this was not a small village. It was a planned Mississippian city with plazas, homes, farms, and ceremonial spaces. Its builders had no trucks, wheels for hauling, or metal shovels, yet they moved earth on a giant scale. Basket by basket, they shaped more than 100 mounds across the floodplain. The greatest was Monk's Mound, a 4-level earthen monument covering about 14 acres. From its top, leaders could look across a city alive with smoke, trade, and ceremony. Cahokia also watched the sky. At places now called Woodhenge, tall cedar posts marked the movement of the sun through the year. Farmers needed seasons, leaders needed calendars, and ceremonies needed the right day. This was a city of builders, astronomers, traders, farmers, and artists, connected to a wide world through shells, copper, stone, and food. By the 1300s, Cahokia was changing. Drought, crowding, social stress, and shifting trade may have pulled people away, though no single answer explains its fading. What remains is not a ruined city of stone, but a city of earth. The mounds still stand quiet and huge, reminding America that one of its greatest ancient capitals was here all along. Number 5. St. Thomas, Nevada. St. Thomas, Nevada began in 1865 when Mormon settlers came to a dry bend near the Muddy and Virgin Rivers. The desert was harsh, but the town learned to grow food from thin water and hard soil. Families planted fields of cantaloupes, asparagus, and grain. Stores opened, children went to school, and wagons left tracks in the dust. For decades, St. Thomas survived heat, distance, and hard work. Then the Colorado River was changed by one of the biggest projects in American history. In the 1930s, Hoover Dam rose in Black Canyon, and Lake Mead began to fill behind it. The water did not rush in like a storm. It came slowly, giving people time to leave while still making return impossible. By 1938, the last residents were gone. The lake rose over streets, orchards, fences, and house foundations. At its deepest, St. Thomas rested beneath dozens of feet of water. A pioneer town turned into a drowned memory. The people who once knew its porches and dusty lanes had to carry the place in stories because the map had been rewritten by the lake. Then, drought pulled the water back. In recent years, visitors have walked through the exposed ruins, seeing steps, foundations, and the remains of the old Hannig ice cream parlor. St. Thomas feels different from many ghost towns because it disappears and returns. The desert did not bury it completely. It waits, pale and cracked, whenever Lake Mead lets go once more. Number 6. Seneca Village, New York. Before Central Park became the famous Green Heart of New York City, the land between 82nd and 89th Streets held a real neighborhood called Seneca Village. Founded in 1825, it became one of the city's strongest communities of free black New Yorkers. Families bought land, built homes, planted gardens, and created a place where ownership meant pride and a safer future for all. By the 1850s, Seneca Village had more than 50 homes, 3 churches, a school, and neighbors from both African American and Irish immigrant families. Then, the city chose the area for a grand public park. In 1857, officials used eminent domain to take the land, forcing residents out with payments that many felt were not enough to replace what they lost. Houses were torn down, roads were erased, and the new park slowly covered the memory of the people who had lived there. For more than a century, Seneca Village was treated like a footnote beneath the grass. Then archaeologists found stone foundations, dishes, buttons, and everyday objects that brought the village back into view. Today, visitors may not see streets under their shoes, but the story is still there. A lost community hidden beneath one of America's most famous landscapes. Number 7. Havre, beneath the streets, Montana. Havre, Montana, stood along the Great Northern Railway, where trains brought travelers, freight, and hard winter winds. By the early 1900s, it was a busy frontier town with shops, saloons, barbers, and families building steady lives on the northern plains. Then, in 1904, a huge fire swept through downtown and destroyed around 60 businesses. For many towns, that could have been the end. But Havre's shopkeepers looked beneath the ashes and found a strange solution. Their stone basements had survived. Instead of waiting for spring or giving up, they moved underground. Below the burned streets, Merchants opened temporary businesses in cellars and connected rooms, turning disaster into hidden life. Soon, people could walk below the city and find almost everything they needed. There was a bakery, a meat market, a Chinese laundry, a saloon, and even a dentist's office. The underground rooms were not fancy, but they were warm, useful, and protected from Montana's brutal weather. Above them, the town rebuilt. Below them, business kept breathing. It was not built to hide treasure or ghosts. It was built because ordinary people refused to let one fire erase their town. Today, the underground passages still feel close and dim, as if the winter of 1904 never fully left, and the old basements are still waiting for footsteps. Number 8. Etzanoa, Kansas. In 1601, Spanish explorer Juan de Oñate led men into what is now southern Kansas, expecting scattered villages and open prairie. Instead, they found something much larger along the Walnut and Arkansas rivers. The people there, ancestors of the Wichita Nation, lived in a settlement so wide that the Spanish called it the Great Settlement. Spanish accounts describe thousands of grass-thatched houses stretching for miles, with fields, paths, storage pits, and people moving through a large organized community. Some estimates place the population near 20,000, making it one of the largest known native settlements in North America at the time. Later, historians doubted the story for generations. For centuries, Etzanoa seemed almost too big to be real. Then, old Spanish records were studied again, and local finds near Arkansas City began to match the descriptions. A 400-year-old Spanish cannonball linked to a fight between Spanish soldiers and native defenders helped prove that the reports were not just legend. The city had been there. This settlement changes the way the prairie feels. What looks like quiet land once held homes, food, trade, and voices across a huge distance. The city did not vanish because it was imaginary. It vanished because memory was buried under grass, time, and doubt. Now the wind over Kansas carries a different question. How many more American cities are still waiting to be believed? Number 9. Kaskaskia, Illinois. Kaskaskia was once one of the most important towns in the Illinois country. Founded by French settlers in the early 1700s near the Mississippi River, it grew into a center of trade, farming, and frontier politics. In 1778, during the American Revolution, George Rogers Clark captured it from the British, helping secure the region for the United States. When Illinois became a state in 1818, Kaskaskia was chosen as its first capital. For a short time, laws were debated there, officials gathered there, and the town seemed tied to the future of the state. But Kaskaskia's greatest neighbor was also its greatest threat. The Mississippi River moved slowly, then violently, eating land year after year. In the late 1800s, the river changed course and cut through the old town site. Floods tore away streets, homes, churches, and records. The original Kaskaskia was mostly washed away, and the surviving land became separated from the rest of Illinois. Strangely, it now sits west of the Mississippi, reached from Missouri, even though it still belongs to Illinois. That is why Kaskaskia feels like a capital that history misplaced. It was not abandoned because people stopped caring. It was taken by a river powerful enough to redraw a state's shape. Today, only a tiny community remains, but the name carries weight. Beneath silt, water, and memory lies the first capital of Illinois, still half present and half lost. Number 10. Indianapolis Catacombs, Indiana. Beneath the busy Indianapolis city market is a hidden world of brick arches, limestone columns, and cool underground air. People call them the catacombs, though they were never built for bones. They began as the basement of Tomlinson Hall, a grand public building completed in 1886 beside the market, when Indianapolis wanted a place for civic life. Above ground, Tomlinson Hall was large and proud, with crowds coming for public events. Below, the basement served a quieter purpose. Before modern refrigeration, the cool underground rooms helped market workers store meat, produce, and other fresh goods away from heat. Wagons, merchants, and workers moved through while the city grew busier above. Then, in 1958, disaster changed the site. A fire destroyed Tomlinson Hall, and the grand building was later removed. But the basement did not disappear. Under the market, about 20,000 square feet of brick-vaulted passageways survived, holding up the memory of a building most people never saw again. The ruins remained under daily footsteps, hidden but intact. The Indianapolis catacombs feel mysterious because they are not far away in some forgotten desert. They sit beneath a living city, under lunch crowds, traffic, and market noise. Their arches still stand in the dimness, showing how the past can remain under ordinary streets. Above, Indianapolis keeps moving. Below, the old hall waits in wide brick shadows. Number 11. Pueblo Grande de Nevada, Nevada. In the dry Moapa Valley of Nevada, long before Lake Mead or Hoover Dam, a large native community grew near the muddy and virgin rivers. Archaeologists later called it Pueblo Grande de Nevada, or the Lost City. Its roots reached back to the basket maker period, and by the ancestral Puebloan era, villages stood there with adobe rooms, storage pits, and fields. The people who lived there were skilled desert farmers. They raised corn, beans, squash, and cotton, where water could be guided from the river bottoms. Their homes were made from earth, brush, and stone, and some buildings held many rooms. Trade also reached far beyond Nevada, bringing shells, turquoise, salt, and ideas through the Southwest. Every item showed patient hands. In the 1920s and 1930s, archaeologists realized time was running out. Hoover Dam would raise Lake Mead and flood parts of the ancient landscape. Crews worked quickly to study sites, gather pottery, tools, baskets, and remains of homes before the water covered them. The Lost City Museum in Overton was later built to protect that memory. Pueblo Grande de Nevada is not lost because no one ever lived there. It is lost because water, time, and desert silence covered so much of its world. What remains tells of families who understood a hard land and made it bloom. Under the Nevada sun, the old city still feels close, as if its walls are waiting beneath sand and blue water. Number 12. Enfield, Massachusetts. Enfield, Massachusetts, once sat in the Swift River Valley, surrounded by hills, farms, churches, and stone walls. It was not famous, but it was deeply loved by the people who lived there. Families knew the roads, the schoolyards, the sound of church bells, and the quiet work of New England life. Then Boston's thirst changed everything. By the early 1900s, the growing city needed a larger supply of clean water. The state chose the valley for the Quabbin Reservoir, a project so large it would erase 4 towns: Enfield, Dana, Greenwich, and Prescott. People were paid to leave, graves were moved, buildings were cleared, and roads that had connected neighbors were closed forever. On April 27, 1938, Enfield held a farewell ball before the town was officially disincorporated. An orchestra played, people danced, and at midnight, Auld Lang Syne filled the room like a goodbye no one wanted to say. After that, the valley changed from home into reservoir land, and the familiar place began to vanish piece by piece. When the water finally spread across the Swift River Valley, Enfield disappeared from the map, but not from memory. The reservoir became a lifeline for millions. Yet beneath its calm surface rests a town of porches, fields, and names. On still days, Quabbin looks peaceful, but its silence carries the cost of water and the ache of leaving home. Number 13. Underground Atlanta, Georgia. Atlanta was nearly destroyed during the Civil War, but by the late 1800s it had rebuilt itself around railroads. Trains made the city powerful, yet they also carved downtown into a noisy, crowded place of tracks, carts, smoke, and traffic. As Atlanta grew, the streets around the railroad gulch became harder to cross and more dangerous. The city's answer was to build upward. In the early 1900s, concrete viaducts were placed over parts of the old street level, creating new roads above the tracks. Storefronts that once opened to daylight became lower-level walls beneath the city. Business moved up, while old brick fronts, alleys, and sidewalks were left below like a buried downtown. For decades, many people passed overhead without thinking about what remained underneath. The lower city became storage space, service passages, and forgotten rooms. Then, in the 1960s, these hidden streets were rediscovered and turned into underground Atlanta, a historic district where visitors could walk beside 19th century brick and ironwork. Underground Atlanta is not a city of tunnels dug for mystery. It is a city that climbed over itself to survive trains, traffic, and growth. Its buried storefronts still show the older face of Atlanta, the one that rose after war and then disappeared under progress. Above, the modern city moves fast. Number 14. Spiro Mounds, Oklahoma. On the Arkansas River near present-day Spiro, Oklahoma, a powerful native center rose between about 900 and 1450 CE. Today it is known as Spiro Mounds, but in its time it was part of a wide Mississippian world of trade, ceremony, and leadership. People came through with shells, copper, stone, and stories from far across North America. The most famous mound was Craig Mound. Inside it was a protected hollow chamber, later called the Great Mortuary or Spirit Lodge. Because the space was sealed away from air and weather, fragile things survived in remarkable condition. Archaeologists found traces of woven fabric, wooden objects, engraved shells, copper plates, and freshwater pearls. In the 1930s, treasure hunters broke into Craig Mound and removed many artifacts before scholars could study them properly. The damage was heartbreaking, but it also revealed how important Spiro had been. Some people called it an American King Tut's tomb because the objects showed a level of artistry and long-distance connection that stunned the public. Spiro Mounds is not just a hidden burial place. It is evidence of a great cultural crossroads in the center of the continent. Its earthworks and preserved objects speak for artists, leaders, traders, and families whose world was larger than many people once imagined. The mounds still rise softly, guarding what remains of a powerful ancient story. Number 15. Thistle, Utah. Thistle, Utah, once sat in Spanish Fork Canyon, where railroad tracks, ranch roads, and a small mountain community followed the river. It was never a huge city, but it mattered to the people who lived and worked there. Trains passed through, families kept homes near the canyon walls, and the town held its place between steep slopes and water. In the spring of 1983, heavy snowmelt and record rain soaked the mountain until the ground began to fail. A slow landslide of clay, rock, and gravel moved down the canyon and blocked the Spanish Fork River. The slide became a natural dam, rising more than 200 feet high, and the trapped water spread backward toward Thistle. People had to leave as the lake climbed over roads, tracks, and homes. The railroad and highway were cut off, and buildings that had stood for decades sank into muddy water. Roofs, walls, and porches disappeared beneath a disaster that moved slowly but could not be stopped. Thistle became one of Utah's clearest examples of a town swallowed by the land itself. The lake was later drained, but Thistle never returned to normal life. Its broken houses and quiet remains still sit in the canyon, weathered by sun, snow, and silence. It feels frozen at the moment the mountain won. Some ghost towns fade because people leave. Thistle was taken while everyone watched, and the canyon still holds the scar. Number 16. Pendleton Underground, Oregon. In the late 1800s, Pendleton, Oregon, sat on a busy route of railroads, ranchers, traders, and travelers moving through the high desert. Above ground, the town had hotels, saloons, shops, and muddy streets. Below ground, basements and passages connected parts of downtown, creating a hidden working world under the sidewalks. These rooms were used for many practical reasons. Merchants could move goods away from dust, thieves, and freezing weather. Underground spaces held card rooms, storage areas, meat markets, and laundries. Stories also grew around Chinese workers and businesses, including places like Hop Sing's Laundry, reminding visitors how immigrants helped build frontier towns while facing harsh treatment. Pendleton's underground history is not one simple legend. Some tales became bigger than the evidence, and historians warn that the Chinese tunnel story is often repeated too easily. But the basements themselves are real, and they still hold the feeling of a town that had two levels, one seen in daylight and one remembered in brick, dust, and shadow. That is why Pendleton Underground feels so alive. It is not only about secret passages, but about the rough side of the frontier. Work, fear, entertainment, survival, and people pushed to the edge of society. When visitors walk below the street today, the old rooms seem to whisper that the West was not only wide open, sometimes it was hidden underfoot. Number 17, Keowee, South Carolina. Keowee, South Carolina, was once one of the most important Cherokee towns in the Lower Towns region. Its name is often translated as Place of the Mulberries, and for generations it stood near the Keowee River as a center of trade, diplomacy, and daily life. Long before the lake existed, this valley carried Cherokee voices, paths, and memory. By the 1700s, Keowee was known to European traders, soldiers, and colonial leaders. Nearby Fort Prince George became a tense symbol of the changing world around the Cherokee homeland. Deals, alliances, arguments, and violence all passed through the region. The town was not just a village on a map. It was a capital tied to power, family, and land. In the early 1970s, a hydroelectric project changed the valley forever. Dams helped create Lake Keowee, and the old river bottom disappeared under rising water. Archaeologists worked to record and save what they could, but the ancient town site itself could not be moved. Keowee went from a living place in history to a submerged place beneath a modern lake. Today, Lake Keowee looks peaceful, with bright water and green hills along the shore. But under that calm surface rests a Cherokee capital, along with the weight of removal, change, and loss. The lake did not erase Keowee, it only covered it. Number 18, Kennett, California. Kennett, California rose in the early 1900s near the Sacramento River as copper turned the hills into money. Mines, smelters, saloons, hotels, and crowded streets made it one of the strongest boom towns in Northern California. At its height, more than 3,000 people lived there, drawn by work, noise, and the promise of a better life. But copper came with a cost. Smoke from the smelters damaged trees, farms, and hillsides for miles around. After World War I, demand fell, lawsuits and pollution pressure grew, and the mines began closing. The Mammoth Mine shut down in the 1920s, and Kennett's busy streets started to empty. A town built on copper could not survive when copper left. Then a second force arrived, water. In 1935, construction began on Shasta Dam, one of the major federal projects meant to control floods, store water, and generate power. By 1944, Shasta Lake filled behind the dam and covered what remained of Kennett. Buildings that once rang with music, work, and footsteps slipped beneath hundreds of feet of cold water. Kennett is not the kind of ghost town people can stroll through at sunset. It is a sunken boom town, hidden deep under Shasta Lake. Its story is a reminder that some towns are lost twice. First when the work dies, and again when the land itself is changed. Above the water, boats pass quietly over streets that once believed they would last. The lake made the final silence permanent. Number 19. Chaco Canyon, New Mexico. Deep in the high desert of northwestern New Mexico, Chaco Canyon became the center of a remarkable ancestral Puebloan world. Between about 850 and 1150 CE, people built great houses from stone, timber, and careful planning. These were not simple shelters. The builders of Chaco moved wood from distant mountains and raised walls that could stand several stories high. Pueblo Bonito, Chetroquetl, and other great houses show a level of planning that still amazes visitors. Roads reached out across the desert, connecting Chaco to a wider region. Trade brought shells, turquoise, pottery, and ideas from far away. Chaco's builders also watch the sky with patience. Many walls, windows, and markers appear linked to the sun and moon, helping track solstices, equinoxes, and long cycles of time. In a land where rain could decide survival, the heavens mattered. The canyon became a place where architecture, ceremony, farming, and astronomy met under open sky. By the late 1100s and 1200s, drought and social change helped pull people away from Chaco. The great houses were left quiet, but not empty of meaning. Their stones still hold the memory of builders who understood light, distance, and season. At sunrise, Chaco feels less like a ruin and more like a calendar made of desert, shadow, and stone. Number 20. Houston Tunnel System, Texas. Houston's hidden city is not ancient, but it feels like a modern secret. Beneath downtown's towers is a climate-controlled tunnel system where office workers, visitors, and shop owners move below the heat and storms. Its story began in the 1930s when underground passages helped people move between downtown buildings. Over time, Houston grew taller, hotter, and busier. What began as a small underground idea expanded into a network beneath the business district. Today, the tunnels connect about 95 city blocks and stretch for roughly 6 miles. Restaurants, coffee shops, banks, and small services line the corridors, turning the space into a weekday world under the sidewalks. The tunnels are practical, but they also feel strange. Most entrances are hidden inside office buildings, not marked like a normal street. During lunch, the passages can feel like a second downtown, full of voices and footsteps. After work hours, many sections grow quiet, and the polished corridors suddenly seem like a city that only exists when people need it. That is why the Houston Tunnel System belongs in a story about hidden cities. It was not buried by disaster, but built to escape weather, traffic, and the pressure of modern life. Number 21. Key Marco, Florida. Long before highways and hotels reached southwest Florida, Key Marco was part of the powerful Calusa world. The Calusa did not need stone walls to build a capital. They shaped islands from shells, wood, and water, creating raised places above the mangroves where leaders, fishers, carvers, and families lived beside the warm Gulf Coast. Their strength came from the sea. Instead of farming like many inland peoples, the Calusa mastered fishing, shell tools, dugout canoes, and waterways. Oyster, clam, and conch shells became building material, food remains, tools, and proof of a society built from the coast itself. At Key Marco, the swamp was not empty. It was engineered and understood. In 1896, archaeologist Frank Hamilton Cushing led an excavation that opened a wet peat deposit on the island. What came out amazed the country. The oxygen-poor muck had preserved wood, cordage, nets, painted masks, bowls, and carved figures that normally would have vanished. The most famous was the small wooden key Marco cat, only inches tall but full of life. Key Marco feels lost because its greatest treasures were hidden in mud, not stone. The Calusa capital left behind no towering castle, yet its objects show skill, power, and imagination. When the mangroves stand still and the water darkens at sunset, it is easy to picture canoes slipping through the channels, carrying a city's secrets between shell islands. Number 22, Robinette, Oregon. Robinette, Oregon, once rested along the Snake River, surrounded by orchards, dry hills, and the steady sound of water. It was not a grand city, and that is what made it feel real, but it had the pieces of a real community: a one-room schoolhouse, a rail depot, family homes, and fruit trees heavy with peaches, apricots, and walnuts in the warm season. The town grew because the river valley could carry both crops and people. Trains stopped there, farmers worked the slopes, and children learned in a small school, while boats and rail cars tied Robinette to the wider region. It had harvest days, river dust, and neighbors who knew each other by name after long days. Then the age of dams reached the Snake River. The Brownlee Dam project promised power, flood control, and water storage, but it also meant the valley would change forever. In 1957, families had to pack up, leave homes behind, and watch the river rise over the place that had held their lives. Robinette was not abandoned by choice, but by water policy. Today, the town site lies beneath Brownlee Reservoir, covered by about 100 feet of water. The orchards are gone, the depot is silent, and the school bell has no children to call. Yet the name still carries the feeling of a small river town that progressed quietly drowned. Somewhere below the surface, Robinette waits under the same water that once helped it live and grow. Number 23, Subtropolis, Missouri. Beneath Kansas City, Missouri, is a hidden place so large it feels almost impossible at first. Subtropolis sits inside an old limestone mine, carved into rock that formed hundreds of millions of years ago. What began as quarry space became an underground world with roads, loading docks, lights, offices, warehouse doors, and long turns cut straight through pale rock. The cave works because the stone itself does part of the job. Deep underground, the temperature stays near 68 degrees through summer and winter. That steady air makes it useful for companies that need storage without fighting heat, cold, storms, or sunlight. Trucks drive through wide tunnels as if they are moving through a city made inside the earth. Subtropolis covers tens of millions of square feet, making it one of the largest underground business complexes in the world. Businesses store records, products, film, food, and rare items there. Even the U.S. Postal Service has used the space to protect collectible stamps, turning a former mine into a vault-like city of work and storage. This hidden city is different from ruins under lakes or deserts. It is not dead. It is alive, busy, and carefully organized beneath ordinary ground, with numbered streets and signs in the rock. Above it, the sunlit Kansas City moves through traffic and weather. Below it, a quieter world hums in limestone halls, proving that some lost cities are hidden because they still work. Number 24, Mesa Verde, Colorado. High in the cliffs of southwestern Colorado, Mesa Verde holds one of the most striking ancient landscapes in America. Between about 600 and 1300 CE, ancestral Puebloan families lived across its mesas, farming corn, beans, and squash in a dry but beautiful land. Over time, their communities moved closer to the canyon walls, where shelter and stone met. By the late 1100s and 1200s, builders created homes inside natural stone alcoves protected by the cliffs above them. Cliff Palace, Balcony House, and other dwellings used sandstone blocks, mortar, ladders, rooms, kivas, and plazas. These were not hiding places for a few people. They were carefully built neighborhoods shaped by skill, planning, and shared labor. The cliffs helped in many ways. The alcoves offered shade from fierce summer sun, shelter from storms, and a strong position above the canyon floor. Smoke from fires, voices from rooms, and footsteps on ladders once filled these spaces. From the ledges, families could see the dry land that fed them and the sky that guided their seasons. By the late 1200s, long drought and social change helped push people south, where their descendants still live today among Pueblo communities. Mesa Verde was not simply abandoned in mystery, it was part of a larger journey. Still, when the evening light touches the cliff dwellings, the empty windows seem to watch the canyon, holding a city in silence and stone. Number 25, Neversink, New York. Neversink, New York was once a quiet Catskill town of farms, roads, churches, and family names passed down through generations. It sat in a valley that looked ordinary to outsiders but felt permanent to those who lived there. People worked the land, gathered at local stores, and followed the seasons of a rural life tied to the mountains and clear streams. In the 1940s, New York City needed more drinking water for its growing population. The valley around Neversink and nearby Bittersweet was chosen for a reservoir. That decision meant the town could not stay. Houses, barns, schools, and cemeteries stood in the path of a project meant to serve millions far away from the Catskills and their quiet roads and familiar hills. Because the water had to remain clean, crews treated the valley with unusual care and severity. Buildings were removed, trees were cut, brush was cleared, and even barnyard soil was scraped away. It was not enough to empty the town. The land itself had to be cleaned before the reservoir could rise and become part of the city's water system. The Neversink Reservoir was completed in the 1950s, and the old town disappeared beneath protected water. Its loss is quiet, not dramatic, but that makes it heavier. A place where people expected to grow old became a source for taps in another city. On calm days, the reservoir looks pure and blue, but under it rests a town purified out of sight. Number 26. Butler, Tennessee. Butler, Tennessee once stood in the Watauga Valley, where mountain roads, river bends, and small businesses tied people together. Before the lake, it was a town with barbershops, cafes, stores, churches, and families who knew the Watauga River as both a blessing and a danger. Floods came often, and in 1941, terrible flood proved the valley needed protection. During the 1940s, the Tennessee Valley Authority built Watauga Dam for flood control and power. Work paused during World War II, then started again, and by 1948 the gates closed. The old town could not stay where it was. Homes were moved or abandoned, families relocated to higher ground, and the valley slowly changed from streets and farmland into Watauga Lake. For years, old Butler rested under the water, like a story people could only point toward. Then in 1983, during a drawdown for dam work, the lake dropped low enough to reveal parts of the drowned town. Muddy foundations appeared again, along with traces of buildings people remembered, including a stone store and the small concrete jail. Butler is sometimes called the town that would not drown, because the community rebuilt above the water and kept its name alive. Still, the old town remains below, quiet under the mountain lake. On calm days, Watauga looks beautiful and clean, but beneath it lies a place where people once walked home before the river was taught to rise. Number 27. Celilo Village, Oregon. For thousands of years, Celilo Falls was one of the great gathering places of the Columbia River. Native families from many tribes came to the roaring water to fish for salmon from wooden platforms, trade goods, and keep old agreements
He looks
alive.
perfect. We are grateful for
Beside
this
the
trade.
falls, Celilo Village became part of one of the oldest continuously used native places in North America. The falls were not only beautiful, they were a food source, a marketplace, and a spiritual center. Salmon surged through the narrow channels, and fishers used long dip nets with skill passed down through generations. The sound was so strong that people said the river could be heard from far away, like an engine made of water and stone. Then came the Dallas Dam. On March 10, 1957, its gates closed, and within hours, the rising water covered Celilo Falls. The great roar faded into a flat reservoir, platforms, fishing places, and a way of life that had survived for ages were drowned by a federal power project. People watched from shore as the river changed. Celilo Village did not disappear from memory because its people still carry the name, the grief, and the rights tied to the river. But the waterfall itself rests underwater, silent where it once thundered. The saddest part is how fast it happened. One morning, Celilo was a roaring center of life. By evening, it had become a ghost beneath the Columbia. Number 28. Los Angeles Prohibition Tunnels, California. Downtown Los Angeles had underground spaces long before Prohibition. Service tunnels, utility passages, basements, and transit routes helped a growing city move beneath its streets. By the 1920s, when the United States banned the sale of alcohol, these hidden corridors gained a darker reputation. In a city chasing glamour, Secrets needed doors. Prohibition did not stop people from drinking. It pushed the trade underground, both in law and sometimes in location. Stories say bootleggers used parts of Los Angeles's tunnel network to move liquor away from police eyes and deliver it to hidden bars, hotels, and back rooms. Some accounts are clearer than others, but the legend fits the city. The tunnels became part of the larger story of 1920s Los Angeles. Jazz, speakeasies, police raids, movie stars, and ordinary people looking for a forbidden night out. A basement door might lead to music. A quiet hallway might carry crates instead of footsteps. Above ground, the city sold sunshine. Below ground, it carried whispers. Number 29. Elba Woods, North Dakota. Elba Woods, North Dakota, once stood along the Missouri River as the center of the Fort Berthold Reservation. Established in 1891, it served Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara families with a hospital, school, agency offices, churches, stores, and homes. It was not just a town. It was a heart of community life on rich river bottom land. The river valley mattered because it held some of the best farmland in the region. Families raised crops, kept livestock, gathered wood, and stayed close to relatives and tribal history. But after World War II, the federal government pushed forward with Missouri River Dam projects, promising flood control, navigation, and electric power. In 1953, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers completed Garrison Dam. The rising Lake Sakakawea flooded Elba Woods and large parts of the reservation's best land. Hundreds of families were forced to move, often to colder, windier, less fertile uplands. Buildings could be replaced in some form, but the river bottoms, graves, and gardens could not. Elba Woods is one of America's hardest lost city stories because the loss was not only buildings underwater, it was displacement, memory, and a community center taken by a project built for others. Today, Lake Sakakawea stretches wide and blue across the valley. Beneath it lies Elba Woods. Number 30. Moundville, Alabama. On a bluff above the Black Warrior River in Alabama, the earth rises in shapes made by human hands. Moundville began growing around 1000 CE and became one of the greatest Mississippian centers in the southeast. By about 1200 to 1300, it was a planned city of mounds, plazas, homes, ceremonies, and power. The people of Moundville built more than 24 flat-topped earthen mounds around a large central plaza. These mounds held the homes of leaders, temples, and public spaces. Farmers grew corn, artists shaped pottery, and traders carried goods and ideas through a world far larger than one village. The city was organized, skilled, and deeply connected. Moundville was not hidden beneath water or tunnels. It was hidden in plain sight by misunderstanding. For a long time, many people did not imagine that such a complex native city had stood in Alabama before European contact. Archaeology changed that, revealing a place with social order, ceremony, craft, and influence across the river valley. By the 1500s, Moundville's great days had faded, though descendants and related native histories did not vanish. The mounds still stand because Earth can remember. At sunset, when shadows stretch across the plaza, the old city seems to rise again from the ground.
If you enjoy this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.
In 1937, a Greyhound bus depot opened in Minneapolis at the corner of 7th and 1st Avenue, a wide, practical building designed for departures. By 1970, it had become a music club. There's a woman in the green army jacket who appears near the dance floor, blending in with the crowd until she simply isn't there anymore. In Falcon Heights, at a farmhouse called the Gibbs Farm Museum, staff and guides have described seeing a small face near the windows. A boy's face, curious, peering in with the particular boldness of a child who knows the house and considers it his. Toys move from where they were placed. These are 30 haunted places in Minnesota. Number 1. Split Rock Lighthouse. Split Rock Lighthouse, 1910, high above Lake Superior. Workers finished a beacon meant to answer disaster. 5 years earlier, the Mataafa storm had torn across the lake and battered the north shore, leaving broken ships and shaken crews behind. The new station stood on a cliff like a promise, with its lens ready to warn sailors away from the rocks below. Life there was beautiful, but lonely. The keeper's family lived with wind, fog, and long winter nights, while the Great Lake changed moods without warning. Keepers climbed the tower, checked the light, cleaned glass, and listened to waves strike the shore far below. When storms closed in, the station felt less like a home and more like a watch post at the edge of the world. That is where the ghost stories begin. Visitors have spoken of a quiet man in an old keeper's uniform, pacing near the high catwalk, as if he is still scanning the water for trouble. Others mention a sudden smell of flowers in empty rooms, or a trace of old fuel near the keeper's quarters, appearing when no simple reason can be found. No one has proven who the figure is. Split Rock was built because people feared losing ships in the dark, so a keeper who refuses to leave almost feels right. When the lantern glows over Lake Superior and the cliffs turn black, it is easy to imagine one more guard on duty, proud, patient, and still silent. Number 2. Wabasha Street Caves. St. Paul, 1800s. Workers cut deep rooms into the soft sandstone bluffs along Wabasha Street. At first, the caves were not a place for music or parties. They were a mine, then a mushroom farm, damp and dark, with earth walls that held every footstep like a secret and kept the city noise far away from the hidden tunnels inside Old St. Paul. By the 1920s and 1930s, the mood changed. The caves became a hidden night spot, later remembered as Castle Royal, where bands played while prohibition stories and gangster rumors filled the city. People came dressed sharp, laughing under low ceilings, never fully sure who might be sitting at the next table or watching from a shadow near the bandstand. Today, the caves are used for events and tours, but some guests say the old crowd never fully left. Men in suits from another age have been seen near the walls. A gentle woman named Ellen is said to appear, and staff have heard a cat meow when no cat is anywhere inside. Heavy chairs have also been blamed on hands no one could see. It happens after the band stops. The Wabasha Street caves do not need chains or screams to feel haunted. Their history is enough. Miners, workers, musicians, guests, and whispers packed into the same stone rooms. When a chair shifts in the quiet or a sound slips out from the rock, it feels less like a trick and more like the past making room for itself again, slowly, under old St. Paul. Number 3. Gibbs Farm Museum. Falcon Heights, 1849. The Gibbs family began shaping a small farm on the edge of a young Minnesota. Jane Gibbs had lived with Dakota people as a child, and the farm's story still connects pioneer life with the older history of the land. Today, the site teaches families about gardens, animals, tools, and the steady labor behind early homes. The farmhouse still carries a plain, lived-in feeling. Its rooms are not grand or cold. They feel close, with wooden cupboards, simple toys, and windows looking out toward the fields. Guides talk about chores, food, and school days, so visitors can picture a child from another time running through the rooms long before the city grew around the farm. That is why the legend of young William Gibbs feels different from darker ghost tales. Staff and guides have described him as playful, not frightening. Toys seem to move from where they were left. Cupboards open and close. Some people say they have seen a small face near the windows, peeking in with the bold curiosity of a boy who knows the house. At Gibbs Farm, it is the sound of a child still exploring a home that history kept standing. When families walk through those rooms, the past does not feel buried. It feels like it may be hiding just around the corner, waiting for someone to notice. It is gentle, but it still makes the quiet farmhouse feel strangely awake. Number 4. The Palmer House Hotel. Sauk Center, 1901. After an older hotel burned, the Palmer House rose in its place with brick walls, electric lights, and a proud new look for a growing Minnesota town. It became a busy stop for travelers, salesmen, families, and visitors moving between farms, rail lines, and the small businesses along Main Street, where news traveled fast and strangers shared tables. The hotel had another claim to history because Sauk Center was the hometown of Sinclair Lewis, who later wrote Main Street and became one of America's most famous authors. But inside the Palmer House, many guests came away talking less about literature and more about sounds that arrived after the halls went quiet and the lamps had been lowered for the night. Some of the best-known stories focus on children. People have reported hearing giggles from empty spaces and the bounce of a ball rolling down a hallway when no children were checked in. Doors behave oddly. Cold spots gather in rooms, and some guests feel watched from just beyond the warm light, as if a small game is still being played. The Palmer House does not feel haunted because it is ruined. It feels haunted because it is still alive. People sleep there, eat there, and listen when the floorboards answer. By morning, Sock Center looks normal again, but the hotel keeps its own little night world upstairs, with footsteps, laughter, and questions that do not leave after dark. Number 5. Fitzgerald Theater. St. Paul, 1910. The Fitzgerald Theater opened as a proud vaudeville house, a place where music, comedy, drama, and applause filled the seats. It first carried the Schubert name, later became the World Theater, and eventually honored F. Scott Fitzgerald, the famous writer born in St. Paul, giving the old room a deeper local memory inside the capital city. Every old theater collects memories, but this one seems to collect voices. For more than a century, performers, stagehands, radio crews, and audiences have crossed its floors. The curtains, ropes, dressing rooms, and balcony all hold that special feeling a stage gets when thousands of people have waited for the lights to rise together across 100 years. Workers have spoken about Ben, a former stagehand spirit who acts less angry than mischievous. Tools appear in the wrong place, small tasks turn strange, and backstage corners seem busy behind the curtains, even when no crew is working. In a building made for timing, Ben seems to enjoy missing his cue on purpose, then leaving everyone to wonder. Then there is Veronica, said to be a former actress whose singing sometimes drifts through the empty auditorium. The sound is not always loud. It is more like a final note hanging in the dark, just clear enough to make someone stop in the aisle and listen. At the Fitzgerald, it feels like the show never fully ends. The quiet room waits to answer back. Number 6. Duluth Depot and Lake Superior Railroad Museum. Duluth, 1892. The Great Union Depot opened near the shore of Lake Superior, built to welcome trains, travelers, and new families coming into the North Country. Its stone arches and high rooms saw immigrants step down with trunks, letters, and hope. Today, the old depot holds museums, including the Lake Superior Railroad Museum, where iron, steam, and memory still share the same air. Inside, the trains are quiet now, but they do not feel empty. Old coaches, engines, and tools stand like witnesses from the age when Duluth was tied to mines, docks, forests, and rail lines. Children stare up at giant wheels, while adults imagine conductors calling out departures under the echoing roof. The building feels busy, even when nobody moves. One story has followed the museum for years. A small, dusty handprint found inside the coal tender of a historic locomotive. It looked like the mark of a little girl, yet the space was sealed behind heavy wooden boards that could not be easily moved. Staff could not explain how a child got there, or why the print stayed so very clear. Maybe it is only dust, shadow, and an old machine playing tricks. But in a depot built for arrivals and goodbyes, a hidden handprint feels like more than a stain. When the lights dim around the engines, the empty cars seem to wait for passengers who never quite left, and the whole room listens like a train is still coming in from the dark. Number 7. Dead Man's Trail. Near Thief River Falls, the woods press closer, and the trail known as Dead Man's Trail carries a name that sounds older than the path itself. This part of northern Minnesota, near the Red Lake River, was shaped by rivers, timber, railroad work, and long winters. Even in daylight, the trees can stand so close together that sound feels swallowed before it reaches the next bend. The trail is scenic, but local stories give it a strange pull. Hikers speak of a heavy quiet that settles without warning, as if the forest has paused to listen. Some say time feels uneven there. A short walk seems longer than it should, or a familiar turn appears too soon. Nothing jumps out. That is what makes it unsettling. People have reported whispers moving through the branches when no other hikers are nearby. Others feel watched from deep behind the trunks, not by an animal they can name, but by something still and patient. In northern woods, wind can fool the ears, and shadows can lean like people. Yet the stories return because the feeling is always the same. Dead Man's Trail is not a legend built from one famous ghost. It is a place where the land itself seems to hold a warning. By the time the sun drops and the path darkens, even a simple nature walk begins to feel like a test. You keep moving, listening for one more step behind you, and hoping the trail lets you leave with the same hour you entered in the dark. Number 8. First Avenue. Minneapolis, 1937. The building that would become First Avenue opened as a Greyhound bus depot, full of engines, luggage, tickets, and people passing through the city. For decades, travelers came and went beneath its curved front, chasing work, family, or a new start. In 1970, the old station changed lives again when it became a music club called The Depot. Over time, the venue became First Avenue, one of Minnesota's most famous rooms. Its black walls, silver stars, and packed floor helped shape the sound of Minneapolis. Prince brought even more attention to the club through Purple Rain, but long before and after that film, musicians felt the room had a pulse of its own. Some buildings never stop performing. The ghost stories fit that feeling. DJs have reported odd sounds slipping into their headphones when no one touched the equipment. Staff have seen shapes moving where no guest should be. One of the strangest figures is a woman in a green army jacket, said to appear near the dance floor, blending in for a moment, before she is simply gone. First Avenue's haunting does not feel dusty or old-fashioned. Maybe the building remembers every bus announcement and every encore. Maybe some people loved the room so much they stayed for one song. Number 9. Landmark Center. St. Paul, 1902. The grand building, now called Landmark Center, opened as a federal courthouse and post office. Its towers, stone walls, and arches made it look almost like a castle in the middle of the city. For years, people came there to mail letters, attend court, and face the serious business of the law under ceilings that made every footstep echo. The building later saw famous federal cases, including crime stories from the gangster era that helped shape St. Paul's reputation in the 1930s. When the post office and courts moved on, the old structure might have been lost, Instead, it was restored and became a place for concerts, weddings, festivals, and community events, keeping its history in public view. Its best-known spirit is often called Jack Pfeiffer, remembered in local lore as a man from the 1930s with a playful streak. People say he tips over bottles during parties and makes small objects misbehave. An old elevator has also been blamed on him when it seems to travel between floors with no clear rider waiting inside. That is what makes Landmark Center special. It was built for order, rules, stamps, judges, and records. Yet its ghost stories are full of little jokes. After the music ends and the guests leave, the castle-like halls grow wide and quiet. Then a bottle shifts, an elevator hums, and it feels as if old St. Paul is smiling from somewhere just out of sight again in the night. Number 10. Kaler Grand Hotel. Rochester, 1921. The Kaler Grand Hotel opened beside the Mayo Clinic at a time when the city was becoming known around the world for medical care. It was not just a place for vacation travelers. Patients, families, doctors, and nurses moved through its halls, bringing worry, hope, and long days of waiting under one roof near the clinic. The hotel was built to make difficult visits easier. Its rooms, lobby, and corridors served people who came to Rochester seeking answers. Some arrived with packed bags and fear in their chest. Others left with relief. That mix of emotions gives the building a different kind of history. It was elegant, but it was also close to some of life's most serious moments. Guests today have described sudden cold spots and the uneasy feeling of not being alone. The most famous story tells of a quiet woman in 1970s clothing who appears inside an elevator. She rides without speaking, calm and still. Then, before the doors open, or before anyone can ask a question, she vanishes as if the elevator carried her into another year. Its mystery is soft, tied to waiting rooms, late-night hallways, and people hoping for good news. When an elevator closes and the numbers glow one by one, it is easy to imagine someone still traveling between floors, searching for a dim room, a loved one, or a moment she never finished in time. Number 11. William A. Irvin Freighter. Duluth, 1938. The William A. Irvin slid into service as one of the proud working ships of U.S. Steel's Great Lakes fleet. For decades, she carried iron ore and coal through rough water, pushing between harbors while Lake Superior tested every rivet. Her decks saw fog, ice, engine heat, and crews who learned to trust steel more than comfort. The ship was also built with surprising polish. Executives and guests sometimes traveled aboard, so the Irvin carried fine rooms along with heavy cargo. That mix makes her feel unusual today. Part hard-working freighter, part floating time capsule. Visitors walk narrow halls and steep ladders, hearing the lake slap the hull as if the ship still wants to move again. The haunting stories gather near the engine room and the long, empty passageways. Staff and guests have reported footsteps behind them when no tour group is near. Others have glimpsed dark figures slipping around corners, gone before anyone can follow. On a quiet ship, even one echo can sound human, but some sounds seem to answer back. The Irvin is docked now, yet she never feels fully retired. Old ships carry the memory of men who worked through storms, coal dust, and midnight watches. When the harbor lights shimmer on her black hull, the freighter seems to breathe in place. Number 12. 300 Clifton Mansion. Minneapolis, 1880s. The mansion at 300 Clifton rose during a time when the city was growing fast from lumber, mills, railroads, and new wealth. Its Victorian rooms, tall windows, and carved wood were built to impress, but also to feel like a home. Today, it welcomes guests as a bed and breakfast while still holding the mood of another century. Old houses speak in small ways. A stair creaks, a wall settles, a door clicks as weather changes. But at 300 Clifton, the stories feel more personal because the house is known for Gertrude, a friendly spirit said to have worked there as a lady's maid in the early 1900s. She is not described as angry. She feels protective, almost proud of the place. Guests have reported hearing a soft hum when no one is nearby, or footsteps moving up the old servant staircase. One of the most famous details is a historic rocking chair that seems to sway by itself, slowly and gently, as if someone has only just stood up. The house does not shout its haunting. It lets people notice it in quiet pieces. That is why 300 Clifton feels different from darker legends. It is less a warning than a welcome from the past. Minneapolis has changed around the mansion, but inside, time seems to slow near the stair and the old rooms. When the chair moves in the stillness, it feels like Gertrude is keeping watch, making sure the house is never truly empty when the city sleeps after midnight. Number 13. Greyhound Bus Museum. Hibbing, 1914. The story of Greyhound began with a simple hupmobile carrying miners between Hibbing and nearby work sites. From that small service grew one of America's most famous bus companies. Today, the Greyhound Bus Museum honors that beginning with old coaches, signs, photos, and the feeling of a road trip that started in Minnesota. The museum is bright with travel history, but its location gives the story a strange edge. It sits close to a cemetery, and that has fed local talk about passengers who may not need tickets anymore. Old buses already carry a lonely mood. Empty seats, metal steps, and dusty windows can make it easy to imagine someone waiting for a route that ended long ago. Visitors have claimed the windows of display buses open or close when no one touched them. Others have seen shadows move across the glass, only to find nobody standing there. Maybe it is a draft, a reflection, or the building settling. But in a museum filled with vehicles made for departures, every small movement feels like someone trying to board again. The Greyhound Bus Museum is not haunted by ruins. Buses once meant leaving town, returning home, or starting over. When the rooms grow quiet and the cemetery rests nearby, the old coaches seem to hold their breath. A shadow crosses a window, and for a second, it feels like the next passenger has arrived after sunset. Number 14. Old Jail Bed and Breakfast. Taylor's Falls, 1884. The stone jail was built when this river town still carried the rough edge of logging days, travelers, and frontier justice. Its thick walls and iron cells were meant to hold trouble in place. Today, the building has become the old jail bed and breakfast, where guests can sleep where prisoners once waited through long northern nights. The setting makes the past feel close. Taylor's Falls sits near the St. Croix River with cliffs, old streets, and a history shaped by lumber and river traffic. Inside the jail, the small rooms still remind people what the building used to be. Even with warm beds and friendly service, the iron bars keep the old story from disappearing. Guests have spoken of cell doors slamming when no one is near them, the sound sharp enough to stop a conversation. Others tell of a friendly young boy seen on the second and third floors, moving through the building as if he knows every corner. He does not seem cruel or threatening, but his sudden appearance has made more than one visitor freeze. The old jail is unusual because it asks people to rest inside a place built for fear. Maybe the sounds are old metal shifting in the night. Maybe the boy is only a glimpse shaped by nerves. But when the halls fall quiet and a cell door answers from the dark, the building remembers its first purpose. Sleep comes slowly there, under the weight of stone and silence. Number 15. Sudan Underground Mine. Sudan, 1882. Miners began pulling iron ore from deep beneath northern Minnesota, creating what became the state's oldest and deepest iron mine. The work was hard, hot, and dangerous. Men rode down in cages, drilled into rock, loaded ore, and trusted lamps, ropes, and each other under thousands of feet of stone near Lake Vermilion. The mine operated for 80 years until 1962 and later became a historic state park where visitors could descend in an authentic cage elevator. Going underground changes the body. The air cools, voices flatten, the dark feels heavy and close. Even before a ghost story is told, Sudan feels like a place where time moves differently. That is exactly what some legends describe. Visitors have claimed to hear faint pickaxes tapping far away, though the mine is no longer working. Others speak of figures like 19th century miners pushing wheelbarrows through the tunnels, seen only for a moment before the dark closes around them. The stories feel quiet, like work still being finished. Sudan's haunting is tied to labor, not drama. Generations of men gave their strength to those red rock walls, and the mine still holds the rhythm of their days. When the elevator rises back toward daylight, it is easy to feel that something remains below. Not a monster, not a scream, but the steady sound of old work echoing in the earth, where the dark keeps counting hours, far below the sun. Number 16. Historic Calumet Inn. Pipestone, 1888. The Calumet Inn opened near the railroad, built from the reddish local Sioux quartzite that gives the town its famous look. Travelers stepped off the train with dust on their coats and found a hotel that seemed grand for a prairie town with tall windows, carved wood, and a dining room meant to impress anyone passing through in style. The inn belonged to the age when rail lines could make a small town feel connected to the whole country. Salesmen, families, performers, and workers came through its doors, while pipestone grew around stone quarries, farms, and main street businesses. At night, the lobby must have held voices from many places, all fading upstairs into long halls above before midnight. Those halls are where the ghost stories seem to linger. Guests have reported piano music drifting through the dining room when the space is empty and no musician is near the keys. Others speak of a well-dressed man in 1880s, clothing walking calmly past, as if late for supper, before fading into the quiet like smoke in the lamplight. The Calumet Inn feels haunted because it still looks ready for the next train. The floors creak, the old rooms breathe, and the red stone outside seems to hold the sunset long after dark. Number 17, Mantorville Opera House. Mantorville, late 1800s. The opera house rose in a small town already rich with limestone buildings, stagecoaches, and river valley history. It became a place where people gathered for plays, music, speeches, and laughter, a bright room in a quiet community. In a town like Mantorville, a stage could make the whole world feel close for one night. The theater survived because people kept caring for it. Actors still step into the light, and audiences still sit where earlier families once watched traveling shows and melodramas. But old theaters always have a second life after the curtain falls. Ropes hang still, props wait in corners, and backstage hallways turn every tiny sound into a possible footstep. Performers have told stories of cowboy boots walking through empty corridors, even when no one is there. Props seem to shift from where they were placed, as if unseen hands are preparing for a scene. And, in one of the stranger details, people have heard a meowing cat somewhere in the building, wandering like it belongs to the cast. The Mantorville Opera House is not frightening in a cruel way. It feels playful, like a show refusing to close. When the seats are empty and the stage lights are dark, the old building still seems to rehearse each night. A bootstep answers from backstage. A prop moves slightly, and the silence feels ready for one more final entrance from someone the audience cannot see. Number 18, Mayowood Mansion. Rochester, 1910. Mayowood began as the country home of Dr. Charles H. Mayo, one of the brothers who helped make the Mayo Clinic known around the world. The estate grew into a grand 38-room mansion surrounded by gardens, trees, and wide grounds where a busy medical family could step away from the pressure of the clinic for a while, far from the city noise. The house was more than a display of wealth. It held family dinners, holidays, visitors, and the quieter hours behind a famous name. Antiques, portraits, woodwork, and personal objects still make the rooms feel lived in. For many visitors, Mayowood is not only about medical history. It is about the private life that stood behind a public legacy. That deep family memory may be why some people speak of footsteps on the grounds or inside the house when no one should be walking. Staff and visitors have described the feeling of being watched with care, not danger. The stories often connect the sounds to the Mayo family, as if former residents still move through the home they loved. Mayowood does not feel like a haunted ruin. It feels preserved, almost protected. The rooms are polished, the lawns are quiet, and Rochester's modern medical world feels far away for a moment. Number 19. Mrs. B's Bed and Breakfast Inn. Lanesboro, 1872. The stone building now remembered as Mrs. B's Bed and Breakfast began as a hotel in a Root River town, shaped by mills, farms, travelers, and bluff country roads. Built from local limestone, it stood through the railroad years, when guests arrived with muddy boots, trunks, and stories from places beyond the valley and along the river after long, dusty days. Local tradition says famous frontier showman Buffalo Bill Cody was among the notable guests connected to the inn's past. Whether people came for business, travel, or rest, the building gathered the kind of history small hotels collect best. Names written in ledgers, meals served downstairs, and footsteps that grew familiar on the stairs above. The hauntings here are gentle but memorable. Guests have spoken of a lady in white moving through the lobby, her pale figure seen just long enough to make the room feel colder. Others tell of a playful child in the garden room, sometimes connected to the sound or sight of a ball bouncing where no child is supposed to be. Mrs. B's feels haunted in the same way an old photograph can feel alive. Nothing has to scream. The river town grows quiet. The limestone walls hold the day's warmth, and the hallways settle into darkness. Then a small sound rises from a room, or a white shape crosses the lobby, and the inn seems to remember every traveler who ever stopped there for the night. Number 20. Minneapolis Institute of Art. Minneapolis, 1915. The Minneapolis Institute of Art opened as a serious home for paintings, sculpture, and objects from across the world. Over time, it became one of Minnesota's great cultural landmarks. People visit for beauty, history, and quiet, moving from bright galleries into rooms that feel older than the city outside the walls. Among its most atmospheric spaces are the historic period rooms, including interiors built with old wood, stone, furniture, and design from earlier centuries. The Connecticut and Tudor rooms can feel less like displays and more like places someone stepped out of for only a minute. That feeling grows stronger when crowds thin and the museum settles after closing. Security guards and staff have shared stories of figures seen in these rooms after hours. A shape passes through the corner of the eye, or a presence seems to stand near the antique walls. Then the space is empty again. Museums are full of portraits and carved faces, so the mind can play tricks, but some stories sound too steady to brush away. The Minneapolis Institute of Art is not a haunted house, which makes the tales more interesting. It is a place built to protect the past, and perhaps the past sometimes answers. When the galleries go silent, and the period rooms sit under soft light, it is easy to imagine old wood remembers its first home. Number 21. St. James Hotel. Red Wing, 1875. The St. James Hotel opened beside the Mississippi River when steamboats, railroads, and grain trade helped the town grow. Its brick walls, high windows, and grand rooms welcomed merchants, travelers, and river people who needed rest after long journeys. From the start, it felt like a proud doorway into Minnesota. The hotel was built by local business leaders who wanted Red Wing to have a place that matched its busy riverfront. Over the years, weddings, dinners, and quiet nights filled the rooms. Guests came and went, but the old building kept its polished wood, soft light, and Victorian mood, as if it still belonged to the River Age. That long memory may explain the stories. Visitors and staff have reported a woman in a white dress moving through the halls, seen for only a moment before she is gone. Others speak of a man in work overalls, as if some old laborer still has a job to finish. Cold spots and soft whispers are also said to drift through empty corridors. The St. James does not feel like a place abandoned by time. At night, the Mississippi darkens outside and the hotel settles into a hush. Then a whisper rises, a floorboard answers, and one more guest seems to pass along the hall, quiet as river fog, still looking for a room. Number 22, Warden's House Museum. Stillwater, 1853. The Warden's House was built near the Minnesota Territorial Prison at a time when Stillwater was a young river town shaped by lumber, law, and hard work. For more than 60 years, prison wardens and their families lived there, close enough to feel the prison's shadow, but still trying to keep a normal home. The house later became a museum, preserving rooms filled with furniture, photographs, and stories from early Minnesota. Its stone walls remember a strange mix of family life and prison history. Children once played there, while locked cells stood nearby. Visitors today can feel that contrast the moment they step inside the old rooms. The most famous story centers on a wooden cradle on the second floor. People say it has rocked on its own, slowly, without a hand nearby. Others have reported seeing a woman in 19th century clothing on the upper landing, watching quietly before fading from sight. The stories are not loud, but they make the house feel awake. What lingers at the Warden's house is not just a ghost tale. It is the weight of a home built beside sorrow and duty. After closing time, the rooms grow still, and the cradle waits in the quiet. If it begins to move, even a little, it feels as if the house is remembering a child, a mother, or a night no one ever wrote down. Some say the upstairs air grows soft and cold, like a lullaby remembered by stone, wood, and shadows. Number 23, Four Paws Restaurant. St. Paul, 1870. The mansion, later known as Four Paws, was built during a time when Summit Avenue and the surrounding city were filling with wealth, ambition, and fine homes. Its towers, woodwork, and elegant rooms reflected a city becoming more important with each passing year. Later, the building became a restaurant, but the house kept its private mood. The name is tied to Joseph Forepaugh, a successful businessman whose family story became part of St. Paul's old mansion lore. Like many grand houses, it held dinners, servants, secrets, and long evenings behind heavy doors. That is the kind of place where legends can grow, especially when the rooms still feel dressed for company. The spirit most often mentioned is Molly, remembered in local stories as a gentle presence. Guests and workers have reported the scent of lavender perfume drifting through rooms when no bottle or flower can explain it. Objects sometimes seem to move without help, and a quiet feeling passes over the dining spaces, as if someone is checking the tables. Four Paws feels haunted in a polished, sorrowful way. The plates shine, the staircases curve, and the old mansion still knows how to welcome people. Yet beneath the candlelight, the past presses close. When lavender suddenly fills the air, it feels like Molly has stepped through the room again, unseen but not forgotten, leaving only her fragrance behind. Number 24. Somson Hall at Winona State University. Winona, early 1900s. Somson Hall rose on the campus of Winona State, giving the school a strong academic home, with Gothic lines, tall windows, and a serious face. Generations of students walked through its doors carrying books, worries, and plans for the future. By day, it belongs to classrooms. By night, it feels older than the campus around it. College buildings collect a special kind of history. They hold nervous exams, late study sessions, teachers' voices, and footsteps from students who only stay for a few years before moving on. Somson Hall has seen those patterns repeat again and again, until the halls seem to carry a memory of everyone who hurried through them. Stories tell of a ghostly professor wandering the corridors, as if still thinking over a lesson or searching for a classroom. Students and faculty have reported footsteps echoing when the building should be empty. Others mention sudden cold drafts that slip through the hallways with no open door nearby, leaving the air strangely still afterward. A school is built on questions, and this haunting leaves one more. Who keeps walking after the lectures are done? When the last light clicks off and the stone halls cool, it is easy to imagine a scholar moving past the doors, still carrying some unfinished thought into the dark. Some say the stairwell keeps one final old lesson. Number 25. Glensheen Mansion. Duluth, 1908. Glensheen Mansion was completed on the shore of Lake Superior as the grand home of the Congdon family. With 39 rooms, gardens, servants' spaces, and a view of the water, it showed the wealth that mining, railroads, and industry brought to northern Minnesota. Even today, the estate feels built for another age. The mansion is famous for its craftsmanship, from carved wood to detailed rooms filled with family history. But Glensheen also carries a darker public memory because of the 1977 murders of heiress Elizabeth Congdon and nurse Velma Piatila. Tours focus on the larger history of the house, yet many visitors know that real tragedy once entered those walls. That is why every unexplained sound seems sharper there. Some guests report sudden chills in the upper halls. Others say they have heard footsteps where no one is walking or seen shadowy figures vanish near doorways. In a house so carefully preserved, even silence feels organized, making any small disturbance stand out. Glensheen is not only a ghost story, it is a place where beauty, wealth, family, and sorrow all share the same rooms. Outside, Lake Superior keeps moving against the shore, cold and endless. Inside, the mansion holds still. When a footstep sounds above, It feels as if the past is crossing the floor once more, asking not to be forgotten. Number 26, Water Street Inn. Stillwater, 1890. The Water Street Inn opened during the logging boom, when the St. Croix River helped carry timber, workers, and money through the town. For its time, the building felt modern and proud, with indoor plumbing and an elevator, rare comforts that told visitors Stillwater was not just a rough river stop. The inn stood near the water, where steamboats, lumbermen, merchants, and travelers once filled the streets. Even today, the old rooms seem tied to that busy age. The brick walls, tall windows, and river views make it easy to imagine muddy boots at the door, voices in the lobby, and cold wind slipping in from the river after dark during winter. The ghost most often mentioned is said to be a Civil War-era soldier. Guests have reported hearing a quiet male voice in rooms on the second floor, speaking softly when no one else is there. Others notice a strange, lingering scent, as if tobacco, old cloth, or some forgotten trace of the past has drifted back into the room after midnight. The Water Street Inn feels haunted because it sits between two histories: the bright life of a river town and the sorrow carried by men who lived through war. When the St. Croix turns black at night and the halls grow still, a whisper from the second floor can feel like a soldier trying to be remembered, one soft sentence at a time beneath the old roof. Outside, the river listens from the dark water below. Number 27, Fairmont Opera House. Fairmont, 1901. The Fairmont Opera House opened when small towns still treated theaters as windows to the wider world. People came for music, lectures, plays, and community gatherings, stepping out of ordinary streets into a room where lights, curtains, and voices could make one evening feel grand for everyone. For more than a century, the building survived changing tastes, quiet years, and new generations of performers. Old opera houses are never just wood and seats. They hold nervous actors behind the curtain, applause from packed nights, and the hush that falls right before a song or line is spoken. That kind of silence can feel almost alive. Visitors and performers have reported footsteps crossing the empty stage when no rehearsal is underway. Some feel watched from the darker parts of the theater, as if an audience is present after everyone has gone home. Others have seen figures in elegant period clothing, standing for a moment before fading into the dim old interior near the walls. At night, the seats wait, the curtains hang still, and the floorboards remember movement. Then a step sounds where no actor stands, and the room seems ready for one more show, played for an audience no one can see in the dark. Some say the old balcony holds its breath before the first unseen note begins. Number 28, Minnesota State Public School Orphanage Museum. Owatonna, 1886. The Minnesota State Public School opened as a home for children who had nowhere safe to go. Over the decades, thousands of boys and girls lived on the campus, learning lessons, doing chores, and sleeping in dormitories far from the families they once knew. The school operated until 1945 in Owatonna. Today, part of the old campus is preserved as a museum with exhibits that try to tell the children's stories with care. It is not just a haunted place. It is a place of real childhoods, with records, beds, photographs, and memories of kids who grew up under strict rules, shared rooms, and the hope that someone might take them home someday. Visitors have reported hearing children laughing in empty halls and the quick sound of running feet where no child is present. Some say books shift on shelves without being touched. Others describe the friendly shadow of a little boy skipping down a hallway, seen only briefly before the building becomes still again at the far end. The Orphanage Museum is haunting because the history is already powerful. Every echo feels tied to a child who once waited, studied, played, or cried there. When the rooms grow quiet, a small laugh in the distance does not feel like a trick. It feels like the campus remembering its children and refusing to let their voices disappear from the halls. Some say the stairwell still carries small footsteps after closing time. Number 29, Enger Tower, Duluth, 1939. Enger Tower rose from the hill above the city as a stone lookout over Lake Superior, the harbor, and the forests beyond. Built in honor of Norwegian immigrant and businessman Bert Enger, the tower became one of Duluth's most beloved landmarks. By day, the tower feels peaceful. Families walk the grounds, tourists take photographs, and ships appear tiny on the cold blue water below. But its height also gives it a lonely feeling. Wind moves around the stone. Footsteps echo inside the stairway, and the city below can seem far away, especially when fog begins to roll in from the lake. Local legend says a mysterious figure has been seen circling the highest levels of the tower. From below, it looks like a person moving near the top, calm and steady, but when visitors climb the stairs to find them, the figure is gone. No door closes, no footsteps answer. Only the wind waits at the landing in silence. It is a watchtower, a memorial, and a lookout over one of America's greatest lakes. At dusk, when the harbor lights begin to shine and the stone turns gray, a shape near the top feels possible. Then it vanishes, leaving only Duluth below and the lake breathing in the dark. Number 30, Minneapolis City Hall. Minneapolis, 1888. Construction began on the Great City Hall and Courthouse, a massive Romanesque building meant to show the confidence of a growing city. Its stone walls, arches, clock tower, and long corridors made it feel serious from the start. For decades, people came there for courts, records, city business, and decisions that changed lives. Buildings like this collect heavy history. Judges, clerks, officers, workers, and worried families all passed through its halls. Some arrived hoping for justice. Others came with fear in their stomach. The grand architecture may look beautiful from outside, but inside, the building has always carried the weight of law, punishment, paperwork, and waiting. The most famous spirit is often called John, a shadowy figure tied to the 5th floor. People have reported seeing him in the hallway, only for the shape to disappear before they can get close. Others hear footsteps echoing when no one is around, or feel sudden cold spots in places that were warm moments earlier during quiet hours. Minneapolis City Hall feels haunted because it was built for facts, records, and proof, yet its own mystery will not stay filed away. When the clock tower rises over the city at night and the corridors empty, one last sound may cross the 5th floor. Then silence returns, leaving the building to guard both the city's history and the shadow named John.
If you enjoy this video, please click the like button.
And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
See you in the next one.